Hi friends and guten Morgen. For those that are new here, I'm Pätrick and I am exploring a year with plant-based wellness topics that intersect with me and personal growth, my family, and the community and how I define that around me. And for some of you that watched a lot of my gardening videos from last year, I kept on talking about winter interest a lot. And I kept identifying how it's important and all of that other stuff. And then I teased this idea of doing a winter garden tour, even as I was putting in some rather immature plants. So today I thought, let's walk around and look at a couple little pockets and see how they actually fare, since we are finally having a proper winter here in Vermont with lots of snow, consistent snow cover, and temperatures that are maybe not traditional, but are close to traditional for what we're supposed to expect. And obviously that's important to have a healthy winter because a lot of these plants demand a dormancy period that is stable and reliable for them to bounce back and thrive throughout the remainder of the spring. But also our state has been in a state of drought for several years now, and a lot of that comes off not having enough precipitation and snow cover and snow melts from the winter and into the spring season. So winter is an important season, and having the right precipitation and right temperatures is also important. And this is the first winter, like I said, in a while that we are seeing what we should be seeing. So enough with the chit chat and yammering on. Let's take a look at some garden beds. So I think most of you will remember that this little oval bed was my first gardening video, rather long and haphazard, but the whole goal was to cover up the well cap here. And I have a Newport plum, and then there are actually some native ferns that are planted around that I'm excited for bouncing back. And then you can see some boxwood variety that is holding up despite the level of the snow. And can we see? I might be struggling a little bit with the light, but we can see that there are some healthy buds on here. So I'm excited, and it's still got some good bendability to it. I'm excited for this. And then just real quick, the the green mountain boxwood is doing well. And then to take a look at it from the other end, you can see a lot of this stuff is just still covered in snow. There is a barberry somewhere over here. There's some hellebores that are supposed to be here. I have a bleeding heart plant right here. And then there's another evergreen that was fairly small, and I think it's here. I can't remember. Oh, and we can't tell. This is actually the top of the winterberry that we planted. So let's move on. Now, I am sorry to report about how this was looking a couple of days ago after a powdery snowfall. Everything just sort of hit the arbs in just a gorgeous way. And I remember even thinking, oh, I should go up there and take a short little film or photos of it because it's just so pretty and exactly what I was looking for. But you can see that the blueberry bushes are doing well. My arbs are doing well. They're bending because we do get some pretty decent winds that come down the river valley. But this is the golden rain tree. I think it's doing fairly well. And then what is still unknown is the Russian sage that's planted down here. Also, another tree that has just prolifically took off. It's one of those examples of what you plant, it establishes, it bolts, or whatever that saying is. We bought this tiny little dogwood tree 2 years ago, and it barely cleared the height of where this wall is. And then since then, it has probably put on another 5 feet worth of growth. And dogwoods are a favorite of Caleb's. So this is one of those places where I can't help but to walk by this little corner and just get reminded of my husband in the garden. So it's important to put those types of plants in where you might not be familiar, but they're like a good reminder of something or someone or a time in your life that it brings back nostalgia or love or peace, and it adds like a depth of satisfaction in your garden space. Or so is my opinion. So this is my Cleveland pear, and it oddly almost looks like it's about to bud out, which I think last year this was one of those early blooms for me, but still it seems quite early with, I don't really know. Maybe this is just an early bloomer for me. And then behind the Cleveland pear is what will be the little vineyard space. And then this is the walking path that I did a lot of work on this past year. There's our outdoor fire pit. And then it always surprises me. This is our white mulberry tree, and it looks a whole lot of nothing. And it's so shocking, the transformation that this particular tree makes, and how fast and how much it grows. Like, I trimmed this down rather significantly last spring, and it put on several feet of growth. And I feel like there is already, like, I could take out these 2 significant limbs, and I also have to stake it down this way a little bit, but I know that this is not something that is impressive right now, but just such a prolific tree that does so well despite the growing zone. We're right on the cusp of where it tends to be a comfortable plant year round, and it just goes to show you that those things that are like a zone away from you, you know, it's okay to just grab one and see how it does, and you don't have to fill up a whole plot full of things. And if it does well, you can look to explore something else, or, you know, sometimes you can even get something in your grow zone and put it somewhere else and it just doesn't thrive. For whatever reason, this white mulberry tree, this is a good spot for it. I don't know why, but it is a big thriving plant. I can't wait to check on this in the spring for what will be a much more colorful and green update. So we are in the shade, but this is, I don't know if you can tell, it's one of those Arctic fire dogwoods, and I bought this as an immature one before it had red coloring, and I honestly was a little doubtful about it. This is now its 4th winter, the first winter where it actually has snow on the ground, and it is such a beautiful standout against the white snow. I mean, even when the blues reflecting in the shade, it's still rather pretty. I'm sort of curious to see how this is going to pop up on camera. I have another one elsewhere that's in the sunlight, so we'll have to stop and look on that on the way back to the house. The weeping crab apple is got some bounce to it. It's doing well. I don't know if you can tell. Some wild turkey tracks that passed through the property, passed through our little orchard. Now we're coming back up on the garden. But let's pop down to our little altar space, and here's where our little pumpkin patch is going to be. It was mildly successful in this past year, but as we know, we are upping our winter squash game like, I don't know, tenfold this year. So this might be repurposed to some other type of long-term growing bed. What you can't tell here is this is the last of our mulch that I can't wait for everything to melt off and put a layer of mulch down on something. And then here's our altar space. I redid this a lot. You can see some of the pencil holly. One of them looks a little rough for wear. I will be rather curious to see how this one handles the thaw and the bounce back. Whereas this one is much more flexible. Oh, I guess there's a lot of die off here too. My other pencil hollies are doing fairly well. So this might be an example of just, this isn't a good spot for them for some reason. But behind them are witch hazel, and you can see their buds are starting to really start to shape up. We've been getting some warmer days recently in the 40s and lower 50s, which, I don't know, in the 50s in Vermont in February is nice, but there's also something alarming about it that you don't expect it until March. And here is an example of something you shouldn't do. This little guy is still in his can, but it's rather shielded and insulated from things because of the snow level. But this is still not ideal. Don't do this. Do as I say, not as I do. But this is going to replace this. There was something about this when we first moved in that it was just the plant that was doing very well here. I trimmed it up and cut back a lot of the stuff that was dying off. I have no idea what natural variety of plant this was. It bounced back amazing the first year, and then it's gone back to its sort of like sad, mangy looking thing. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to put our little altar space here and then put this behind it, and it will be enough to be able to walk around the altar space in like a full circle type of approach. And then I'm going to take this out, and then I'm going to pop in, what I want to do is pop in a bunch of Japanese ferns this year. That's one of my ornamental goals for this year. So these are, what are these? Oh, these are red buds, which are also a native plant. And I got them for 75 cents at a local store at the end of the year. There's two of them. There's actually one over here. And I figure they needed some love. And I always have a soft spot for the neglected plants at the stores that need some love. And so for a tree for 75 cents, yeah, we took them home. So there is some dieback, as you can hear, but there is some flexible leaders at the top. So I am excited to see how this is going to bounce back. I think it's going to do fairly well. And then we have our semi-privacy arb hedge. We have one that has to be replaced, which, again, as I've mentioned in a prior video, whenever I plant a grouping of arbs, whether it's 3 or 11 or 20, there's always one that does not make it, no matter how many. It could just be the one itself, and in that case, you know, basically just come home, throw it straight into the garbage. But they are doing fairly well. There's my Zakova tree and Prudence with my little bent branch that I loved and pointed out when I was planting. But you can see super healthy buds on here. So that's exciting. This is going through dormancy really well. I talk about winter interest, but as you can see, just putting in one of these arbs at the anchor point of, and then these ones are gonna go back here a little bit. There's a gap in the run, and I didn't get them in the ground before our first hard freeze. So that's where they were. But just by anchoring these two, it sort of creates a pop out of definition, even when there's 2 feet of snow on the ground. So I think I'm walking on about 2 feet of ice and snow right now. You can see it's pretty much level with my already tall raised beds. I feel so tall. I feel like this is how Caleb looks down on life. But yeah, I actually have some potential plans for expanding this area, which I don't know how I feel about just quite yet. But I think I'm going to put in a row of beds behind here and move these and open it up a little bit more. But I think that's going to be an end of season project. We'll see how my growing a ton of produce project goes. So we are behind the garden space, and as you can see, there's so much room back here, and I don't necessarily think that our family garden has to expand this way. I think the only thing that it really would accomplish would be more light options, because if I still insist on growing viney things like snap peas or taller things like corn, that should be up there somewhere so the shadows face that way. But outside of that, the other issue is the back side of this bed. It's too deep. It's roughly, I think, a 3-foot stretch from where the little aisleweg is, and then this big one right here, it's like anything in the back middle here is, unless you get up into the bed, it's rather impossible. So I think this is the other idea on why here's a pro argument for why go through the work of moving out the bed would be to, one, put a pathway here, but if we're going to do that work, we might as well push these plants back a little bit, and we can put in a pathway behind it and then wrap it a square around. So now that we've planned our first permanent garden bed, we now know the mistakes that we've made and what we would fix. And I think being able to walk around it fully, and so I was able to accomplish that with, you know, these 4, and then the weird beds that I made like this. And I thought I was being efficient by putting them around and trying to maximize space, but there was still places that were out of reach. I should have put in a walkway behind it. And then again, if we're gonna do this work, why not put in, like, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, just standard box size ones, like in the 2 center here, maybe like 8x4. And then, because I don't know what other purpose this space would really hold. I do know that this year I'm going to be planting, this is going to be one of those places where we're going to put in a ton of sunflowers and zinnias for my pollinators, and also, you know, Caleb's sunflowers I think are going to be a row here, so that way they'll grow up and they'll be nice and tall behind the garden bed. So it's a little bit more of a dual aesthetic of visual purpose of they're pretty, they're nice to look at, but also they'll add some height and depth behind the garden bed, and I think it'll be really pretty. So we had an ice storm last night. And this tree has ton of damage. I wonder if you can see. But a lot of its main branches were taken down. Which makes it a little easier because I've been wanting to take this down for a while, but Caleb loves how it's mature and it's established. I don't like how it hasn't produced anything in any of the years that we've been here, but I think this is a sign that this failing tree has got to go and make some room for something new. I know I mentioned this in my planning video, but if you can believe it, right here is a row of gooseberry. It's the green Pixberry or something. It's the green gooseberries. So I gotta take these all out because they're just in an inconvenient spot. So what I was talking about, opening up this space of where I think I'm gonna plant all this produce this year. This tree is unfortunately going to come down, as we just saw, but if I open that up and then remove these, there will be a clear pathway to the accessibility of the rest of the yard. And then how this is going to change is, so this will be the entranceway to this whole, what will be like our little bocce ball court field space for like family recreation use. But then I think I'm going to plant a bed here to section this off and then make it like a wide curve to match with the little orchard here. I had to switch cameras because the other one died on me. That, and we now have a barking dog in the background, so I apologize. But where I left off was with the, I don't know if you can tell, this is the Newport plum that we planted this past season. It's got a bunch of healthy buds on it, but and it's got a whole bunch coming up here at the top. I'm a little curious to see how this one's going to leaf out. I actually think that this, one of these main branches right here, so there was some damage to it and this is potentially dead, but I don't like to fuss with that until after things bud out for the season, and I want to see, because it potentially could be, you know, alive and active up to a certain point, so I don't want to cut it down too far because it does sort of balance with the tree right now, because if this whole thing has to go, it's like this lopsided tree already, which isn't the worst thing, and it will eventually fill itself out, especially because the sunlight comes from this angle, as we can see with this early afternoon sun. So yeah, this might have to be trimmed down. We'll just have to see. Now this is actually a Newport plum from a season before the last one we just looked at. And so you can see that it has a lot more growth on it and a lot more buds. So I'm excited to see how much fuller this tree is going to be in relation to the one we just looked at. Here's one of our production plum trees. I forget what variety this is, but I'm not really great with stone fruit, but when your husband says he wants plum trees, you buy plum trees. So, plus these also are nostalgic for him and his childhood. So there's one here, and then there's one that pairs it here, which the other one is significantly smaller. It looks really small with just the angle that we're standing at, but this one is, if you keep in mind that there's about 1.5 feet of snow from the ground, you can see how mammoth this is just in its 3rd year of growth. And there are a ton of buds ready to bloom out. I think this is going to be the first significant year of plum harvesting. We had a plum tree that was, well, it's that stubby thing over there by the other Newport tree, and it produced for us. We made like plum wine with it, very, very small batch, which made us sort of want to explore keeping plums on our property, even though that other tree had to go. We lost that one a few winters ago, and then even after we tried saving it by cutting off like the dead and dying parts, but there sort of like this other stone fruit tree that is unfortunately gonna go. I think it was just at the end of its time here. But I'm excited. This is one of those other exciting things to be looking for. This is a Robinson crabapple, and we have a couple of these just strictly for feeding wildlife in the winter time, but also it does have some winter interest. Obviously it's almost basically pre-spring interest at this point. There's just one little piece of fruit that's left, but this was again like a little twig in clearance 2 years ago, and it's doubled in size. It's growing all sort of haphazardly, which I sort of love about it, to be honest, and I'm excited to see how this is going to change in size once spring comes and this buds out. I have a feeling that this is the year that that our Robinson crabapples are going to just bolt and take off. And then our driveway is lined with a couple of barberry varieties that offer color with like purple and then like this lime green. But for winter interest, we do have these princess holly bushes. And these are, again, this is the third year for them. They're starting to really take off. Now the lighting is horrendous right now, so if you can think past that. And these are the limelight hydrangea hedges, and I don't know if you remember from the video, I had to just stop and take a minute about how gorgeous they were and are. This is what they currently look like. It's amazing how much growth they put on in the summertime. But they are just these tiny little twigs with, you know, a little bit of winter interest in the idea of these dried out blooms that do stay on for a good part of the winter season, considering we're coming into spring in a couple weeks. So here is another dogwood, keeping with the dogwood theme for Caleb. And I know it doesn't look like much right now, but this was another one of those trees where it was just a couple of dollars. It was on clearance because there was a lot of damage to it. And then if you can see, I cut off a lot of the damage. So it has like this gnarly, you know, rather uneven growth pattern to it. I think it's gonna fill out and be fine in a couple of years, but I'm excited because it's got all this potential to it. It's got all these buds ready to go, and I'm excited to see what this summer does to it. And then I think I'm gonna end my video right here just by showing you, here's one of those red twig Arctic fire dogwoods that are just beautiful against the snow with the red. I feel like I'm looking at the display and it's not doing this justice, but if you think about winter interest, think about these plants, because I know a lot of people think about evergreens and you get the limes and the blues and the greens, especially with your hollies, you get those like dark evergreen tones. But you know, I'm not one for red blooms or even red foliage to a degree, but there's something about red bark, red twigs that I think is beautiful. It's hard to imagine this is all a garden bed. It has so many flowers and bushes and lavender, and I'm going to change this walkway this upcoming year, but there's nothing going here. So what this tells me is I do need something with a little bit of height and maybe a little bit of color to it. I might think of one of those like lollipop spruce trees, or I forget what they're called, but I'll have to point them out later in the season once I find them in a store. So that is it for my winter garden tour. I know it's a little boring because everything looks like it's sleeping, but like this is the part of the year where plants get to conserve and build up their energy for a beautiful grow season. and spring comes fast here. It's something that Caleb always points out to me, is like, you can blink and everything's green again. And we're just a couple of weeks away from that. So, but these are the couple of the things that I wanted to point out that we did this past 2020's grow season, what I'm excited about coming up and what to look for. And yeah, so let me know what you are looking forward to in your garden spaces. Remember to grow from where you are, and I will share more with you soon. Tschüss.